Hello, I am with Father Joseph here. We want to talk about what we are finding, especially with this time when people are seeking help from God. They are making a lot of prayers in different forms, but they feel that their prayers are not answered. And that's why I want to come back to Father Joseph. We talk more about prayer and how we should view prayer in a right way that can help us feel at ease at this moment and feel connected with our God. And that's why we want to talk about prayer in emptiness. He knows what he's going to talk about and he will elaborate on that. We are going to hear much more. Yes, Father Joseph.
Thank you very much. Denis says prayer in emptiness. And in our Carmelite spirituality, we are privileged to know that prayer is a journey to union with God. But like any other journey, along the way, sometimes things get difficult. And when things get difficult, it's not a moment of giving up or giving to despair that things don't work. And indeed, along the journey of prayer, when we begin to pray, everything looks very nice. When we pray, when we recite the breviaries, when we say our prayers of devotion, it brings a lot of peace, it brings a lot of consolation, it brings a lot of delight and comfort. And when we make prayers of petition, sometimes everything we ask for works according to the way we probably presented it to God and the way we have put it, and the expectations come to be true. But there reaches a time when we realize everything begins to lose sense. It's like everything is turned upside down. The prayer you used to enjoy, that it brings a lot of delight, you feel tired of saying it. You don't see any sense of it. When you make a prayer of petition, it seems nothing is working. And there is a very strong tendency of saying, I cannot pray anymore. A strong tendency of saying, I can't pray. Although the desire and the awareness of God is there. St. John of the Cross, our Holy Father, teaches us that those type of moments will occur along the journey of prayer. And when they occur, it is good. But we can only be enlightened to know that it is good, that it is happening to us, if we have also somebody who is well informed and experienced. What I mean is a spiritual director who would be able to guide us through this process. So we should not be discouraged, because that is what John teaches us in our spirituality, that the senses that used to help us to find a lot of delight in prayer and consolation seems to be going silent. And so there is what we call the the passive night of the senses that seems to be entering in. And that ushers also in the active night of the Spirit. And so when we experience this, and when we have a good director to lead us, then even with these tendencies of saying, I can't pray, I don't want to pray, although there is still the sense of the awareness of God, we need to be there and persevere through it, because we come to realize, those who know prayer, that now we are moving along the journey, we are moving away from discursive meditation, and God is leading us through this difficult moment into the contemplative prayer. And that's a very beautiful element of our life. And in those aspects, there there is what we call the inflow of God. We come to realize that we are not in charge. We are not our own savior. And things are beyond our control. There's only one thing we need to do, to give that space for God to penetrate us, God to enter into us, and to be able to see with trust and confidence that He is at work in us. What do we need to do? To remain in attentive awareness of His presence. Now, that attentive awareness of His presence will come with a lot of difficulties, because since we know we are not our Savior, and to accept Him to enter into our lives will bring a lot of challenges, and it will slow us down in many things because it is difficult to understand it. And the situation we may be going through is can be difficult, painful, discouraging, suffering. Certainly, not every suffering is a night in our spirituality, we say, but every suffering or pain and discouragement can be the night, because what happens here becomes the night only when we come to recognize the God content in this situation. Now, the God content will wrestle our minds, because the question is, why should God put me into this situation of struggling, of understanding, of pain, and of suffering? But it's good, because it is there. We continue to realize our helplessness by ourselves, that we are not in control. God takes charge, God content. But because we remain in that attentive awareness of God's presence, there is one thing then we need to do to accept the situation. And we accept the situation in faith. Faith plays a very important role, yet faith can be dark as well. Now, it's only God who can turn things around in us, help us, draw out inspirations, and also inspirations that make us to begin looking at things and the reality in different perspectives. And this is where I come to bring out this idea of perseverance. Perseverance is not just to sit there and then you wonder whether something is happening. No, it is a creative response in this situation, how we respond to the God content situation we are going through the pain. And there, the pain changes. The content of it changes. And everything, our response becomes new. Now, the perseverance in faith would require that in every circumstance, which is God content, that we can reach to it as God content, then we should not panic. Acceptance does not mean we should run away. And then the pain will be there. But when we persevere in it, that means we accept it, we get new inspirations for living with it, and also moving forward. Eventually, we'll come to realize something new in us. It is God who loves us, who unlocks everything that seems to have been blocked. When it is blocked by ourselves, we cannot unlock it. But it is only God, and with the love with which He has for us, because we are journeying towards Him, unlocks it and enlightens our way along the journey.
Wow. What we have just heard from Father Joseph on this dryness during our prayer moments, and which men are experiencing, has got some insights which I really want both of us look at it, myself and you, in a deeper way. He has said some serious aspects, and which I want to say, why did he point them out? First is about the spiritual director, who can help you realize that you are in your dry moment or your dark moment, so that he can redirect you to godliness, or how to be focused on God. Now, Father Joseph, I come back to you. Why do you think Now people are in self-quarantine, and you are talking about spiritual direction. How can this be? And why are you insisting? I know St. Teresa talked about good spiritual direction, what you already repeated. St. John is talking about. Why do we need to talk about spiritual directors, and how can we access them? If you can help us.
Well, we know in our spiritual life, we cannot understand everything by ourselves. And we need to be helped, to be directed, to see the light of God in our lives. And in that point, we need to have spiritual directors who are experienced. Experienced, not experienced just in life, but experienced in prayer, and with these realities that also happen. And to get a good spiritual director would then make us also to accept what we are going through. Now, it has to be a good spiritual director, because in this situation, especially in what I have explained, there are a lot of things that we go through. People ask questions. Why is God doing this to me? Why am I unable to pray? And there is a tendency to say maybe God is punishing me for my past sins, for all these, and that's why He has brought all these things. Along the journey, this happens. But unless we are enlightened by a director who would understand exactly what we are going through. And that's why we in Christian spirituality emphasize on the importance of a spiritual director, somebody to help us to see what God is doing in our lives at a particular time. Now we have to choose spiritual directors who are good spiritual directors and who are able to help us, because there are people who are not experienced, who are not very good in directing. Rather than helping us to see what we are going through, they can begin to condemn us in what we are going through, and then there everything will fall apart, because we need to be guided, we need to be helped. But instead of helping us, they may be able to add more injury into whatever we are going through. So that's why we need very good spiritual directors. Now, not every priest can be a spiritual director, a good spiritual director. We have them. We have lay people, we have religious, we have the priests who can be very good spiritual directors to see us through along the journey. In this situation of the pandemic where there is the lockdown, now how do we get a spiritual director? That is difficult. We can't deny it. If you had one before, and then that is the time you need to be in consultations with the such directors. Although it's not really recommended that we operate like a spiritual director with a spiritual director on the phone. But this is the circumstance. This is the circumstance in which we are. To explain to such a person that this is what I'm going through, and seeking his guidance would be very necessary. Our lives, we need that guidance always. That is the importance of the spiritual director.
Thank you. Again, we need a spiritual director for him to help us see what our senses cannot see at the moment when we have reached in this darkness. And what is saying true, that we need to get a good spiritual director so that he can focus us to the love of God. Now, look at that. Because early on you said about we are being drawn by the love of God.
Yes.
And in this, what does that mean, love of God? And why is it a love that is painful in spiritual life?
Oh, the love that is painful. Some of these things are very difficult to explain. Again, difficult to explain because nobody wants to undergo pain.
Sure.
But we need also to know pain or suffering is life, is real. And we cannot just say, I must not undergo some pain or some discouragement or some suffering. The tricky part of it is God does not really inflict, is not God inflicted pain on us, because God wills us good, and because He loves us. But because pain is a reality of life, when it happens, there is something unique to those who believe in God that happens. Because the human tendency is, let me rush to take away maybe the causes of this pain, what is bringing this discouragement or suffering. And as I said before, we may reach a place or a stage where we realize it is beyond our control. When it is beyond our control, there is something that is above us that is able to unlock this situation. And He's unlocking it because of His love for us. We only need to do one thing: to acknowledge that God is love and He loves us. And in that context, with trust and confidence in Him, that love we show Him, it is that same love which unlocks and brings better insight of not only understanding, but also accepting the reality, not running away from it or looking for solutions, but moving on in life with it, but without the pain now.
Wow. Now, that we can transform a painful moment to be a loving experience. And that's why I'm going back to John of the Cross. When John of the Cross turned his dark night to write, to share his experiences, because today we know what he went through, because he turned this painful moment to be a loving moment. Father Joseph is going to explain that shortly, as we also will be challenged on how to turn our pains into a loving experience. So tell us, Father, how did John of the Cross turn, or give us an example of John of the Cross turning his painful moment into loving experience and gazing into God?
Well, John underwent many experiences that we would say are very painful, but those pains, when you see it in his writings, were not moments for him to lament over them. Right from his background, from the time he was born, and in his family, when the family, after the death of his father, the family was actually, they were denied, him, his brother, and his mother, and they went all sorts of things, up to the point that providentially he came to be to enter into the formation with the Carmelites. It is a long story, painful, but one thing would realize it is he never lamented over those situations. Neither did he seek for any sympathy from anybody concerning those situations. A big example, of course, was when the misunderstanding arose between him because of his connections also with Teresa and with his own brothers in the monastery. Then he was put in Toledo prison, and in that prison was in a very small room which we call the cell. By the way, for us Carmelites, where we sleep, we call them cells, and it is our prison rooms. A small room with nothing, literally. And he underwent a lot of pain, little food, and sometimes being beaten and being psychological tortured by the words the brothers would be discussing along the corridor. And then all sorts of things we could say concerning a person who is suffering. But that even forced him to find ways of escaping from the prison and took refuge in the convent of the sisters. That's okay. But as I said, there were painful moments, difficult moments, but what happened with it? What happened is this pain became the source of his great poem, The Dark Night. The Dark Night that we are talking about, the Dark Night that he wrote based on his prison experience, very painful experience, but in it he only saw the love of God. But the love of God that transformed him completely in such a way that we who read about him, who learn about him, who live this spirituality, sometimes end up sympathizing with him. And sometimes we begin to think, can I undergo such a life that, and then I remain like this? So John is the source of our encouragement, but we need to know that love of God that he has learned through the sufferings, the experiences of his suffering, was leading him to one thing: a union with God.
Wow. We have heard it that we should not look at any pain we go through as a separation from our beloved Father, but it's a moment to have a reunion. And it is this time we need proper guidance, proper focus, as Father said in our prayer. And if this is going to make it more applicable in self-quarantine, I know none of us is really happy with what is happening, but there is something we can learn. We can write also a poem. We can also be a person of inspiration. We can start putting some elements that we can share with someone somewhere that can take them from their darkness. Maybe you can be a good director now that you are listening to us, to help someone see the light that has been brought by the senses, because you want to direct them to God. And this he did. We have read it. And the way Father is saying, we start sympathizing with him now, which should not be the case. Don't look for sympathizers. Look for serious people who can read to God. And that's why I want to bring again further to this point now. How did he go ahead to write now the ascent to Mount Carmel?
Yes, the ascent to Mount Carmel, again, if you look at the opening chapter, so the introduction part of it, his target is again to look at our prayer life as a journey to union with God. And of course, there are three paths. There is to the mountain, and then there's a middle path. There are those other side paths that go. But of course, in order for us, I can't explain everything. The ascent that is in 3 books, and if you look at the first book, that deals with our disordered appetites, literally dealing with the joys and satisfactions we gain from our senses. And then when we take those paths with those joys and happiness, and they don't lead us to that union. And of course, the other path as well. But of course, of all things we know about him, there is one thing he talks about: nada, nothing. It is only when we get rid of ourselves, of all these other things, that we are set free to focus along this path that leads us into union with God. And of course, in our spirituality, we know in our Carmelite spirituality, and in St. John of the Cross teaching us this thing, when we get rid of these things, it gives us the opportunity to grow in virtue. And that growth in virtue makes us to focus on doing the will of God in our lives. God's will and our will come into conformity, leading us into union with him. There is a stage where we need to do a lot of work with ourselves. We put a lot of efforts. There reaches a stage that we don't need to do a lot of efforts. He does it himself in us. We only need to remain in attentive awareness of him. Teresa tells us, in very simple terms, remember, we make a lot of efforts in drawing the water from the well. Yes, So those are the efforts we make in getting rid of the disordered appetites, those appetites that tend not to lead us to God. Now, I am speaking on these things. Presumption is not good, but in awareness that those who are listening to this are people who have begun the journey of prayer. So it is not that they are ignorant. No, you know prayer. And what is prayer? And what prayer does? And if you have not started it, what I'm saying will not make sense to you. But if you have already started it, you are along the journey of prayer, then this will make a lot more sense to you, and you will discover more things, or you might ask more questions so that you may be enlightened more and more. This is the beauty of Carmelite spirituality, but you have to be into it. You have to be into it in order to be into it.
Wow. As you have heard, there are moments we become confused or into a crossroad. And that's why Father is very key to this, that what we are discussing now is meant for someone who has come to a crossroad and want to pick it from there. And that's why we are talking about taming our appetites for us to focus. Yes, there's that time we need to do our portion, of which is serious. You need to reach out to your director or consult. You need to know what takes you out of the real focus of your spiritual journey. One, you have had it right. Appetites that are mostly exciting. It's not all exciting moments that are good spiritually. And that is where our senses may misguide us. And we need a spiritual director to guide us. If that is the case then, and he has said it rightly, we need to find this focus in our prayer. I would wish in the next recording we'll be talking about the interior castle. He has just talked about drawing water. That's one way St. Teresa expresses how we struggle to make things in our life. That will be in another recording. But from John of the Cross, we are getting that focus on climbing on the mountain. And Father has put rightly, we need to keep climbing. If you have a question, you are always welcome, because we cannot say it all in one recording. Until we hear what you are struggling with, we will get back to you. I'm getting back to him so that he can give us a final word on St. John of the Cross on prayer. Yes, Father.
In our spirituality, which is open to everybody who desires to be with God, and John of the Cross is very beautiful, and many people, unfortunately, fear studying St. John of the Cross, or even learning his experiences that leads us to God, union with God. But what I want to say is a spirituality, the teaching of St. John of the Cross, if we are people of prayer, is something that we can embrace. Because John is real. John is down to earth. John is authentic with his experiences. And when we embrace his teachings, we realize our life of prayer does not necessarily become easy. No, I'm not saying that. But it will make us to understand better our journey of life to God in a way that does not constrain us, but that we come to the realization that unless we reach that point of surrendering totally to the love of God, that we cannot reach a union with Him. And above all, it is in the context of that love. John is very, very emphatic on that element of God's love and our love for Him. And so, as I said, it is that love and trust that we have for God, and knowing how much God loves us, that unlocks everything and sets us free along the journey to union with Him. So our prayer, not necessarily becoming easy, but something we would always want to move on with and to embark on it. Love him. And as he says, where there is no love, put love and you'll get love.
Wow, that is powerfully put. And those words, where there is no love, put love and you will find love. This is what we have heard about prayer. So prayer is not something that you want to chime in and enjoy seated there. It's something you want to engage fully into. And it's something you have to become real. You have heard it. You are not going to pretend when it comes to prayer. You can pretend in anything else, but in prayer, you need to be real. Bring all that you are going through, your struggles each day that can be addressed by your Creator, by your spiritual director, so that you can be seen where you are stuck. Be real. But above all, what he has said is to put love. We look forward to keep giving you much inspiration on prayer. As comrades, we are humbled that you are following us, and it's our hope. We want to take you through this journey to empower you during this self-quarantine, during this difficult moment when senses cannot see beyond. We come in handy to give insights that will help you become more confident, especially in your prayer life. Because St. Teresa of Avila says, prayer is having an intimate relationship with God. That is a message for you. You have heard from St. John of the Cross, where there is no love, put love, and you will find love. I don't know what you believe. Looking forward to see you in the next recording. Thank you so much. May God bless you.